think it's been about 5 minutes. I think we will have some students joining late, so we'll just carry on. For those of you that I haven't met, I'm Warren Kistner, Director of the Hart Career Center here at Illinois Wesleyan. And on behalf of our office and the Office of Human Rights and Social Justice, I'm very pleased to introduce you to today's panel, Work That Matters. These are 4 alumni who are just doing incredible work. When I read their resumes, I was tired. I thought if I got to their bio, I'd be a little less tired. That wasn't true. So for purposes of introduction today, I'm going to keep it relatively short because they're going to fill in a lot of gaps, and I want you to hear their stories. So we have with us today Emily Coles. Emily graduated from Illinois Wesleyan in 2011 with a double major in international studies and French. Emily holds a master's degree in human rights from the London School of Economics. She has a diverse international background working in the field of human rights. Her experiences include the World Health Organization in Geneva, the U.S. Embassy in Sarajevo, the Danish Refugee Council in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia, and Praxis in Belgrade. That's a snapshot. Charlie Sell, on the end down there, graduated in 2010 with a degree in political science. Charlie worked for the Illinois Governor's Office in Washington, D.C. as a federal liaison to the Dunn Fellowship Program, a program that some of you may want to look into. He was selected as a Rotary Ambassadorial Scholar, where he completed a master's degree in international relations in Geneva. From there, he moved to the Democratic Republic of Congo to work with the International Organization for Migration. Jessica Meyer. Jessica, wave to the students. Class of 2011. Jessica had a double major in international studies and Hispanic studies. She completed a Master of Arts in International Training and Education with a concentration in Global Education from American University. She teaches at Brightwood Education Campus at DC Public School. Monica has won scholarships to study peace and nonviolence in India and Mexico, compares schooling and education in Argentina and Turkey, and received training on the United National UPR process of the Human Rights Council in Geneva. And last, but certainly not least, is, did I get through all that?
Yeah, so that was Monica.
Okay, so I missed Monica. Last but not certainly not least, and she can decide what she wants to share about any other activities from the weekend. So I missed.
I'll.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so Emily's going to lead us off.
And Jessica.
Oh, Jessica.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My apologies.
No, it's okay.
My apologies. Okay, Jessica. Let's go back to Jessica. Jessica's received, has focused on improving living conditions in Detroit, a big task. And she's worked as Director of Programming for the Build Institute, a small business and entrepreneurship training and support program. She's currently working as a Director for Human Scale Studio, a strategic consultancy that helps business, philanthropy, and civic institutions shape the future of the modern world. So please help me welcome our 4 panelists.
So we just want to start by thanking the Career Center and the Center for Human Rights and Social Justice for having us today. We're really excited to be here and share our experiences. I do just want to start by also thanking Brock, who's in the back, because he is the reason why we are here. He, as of 7 a.m. this morning, is engaged to Monica. So I hope that my presentation is easy to follow. How do I get it? Oh, slideshow, thank you. because I've had quite a few experiences, and so I'm hoping that the Q&A can be sort of to clarify if I'm not clear about something. But basically my interest in human rights really started when I took international human rights with Professor Epstein, who's sitting in the back. I had had an experience working at the World Health Organization before that, and so I knew a little bit about the work that is in the human rights field, but I did an independent research study on the Bosnian War, and I became just totally perplexed by the concept of genocide and how people who had been living together for generations could all of a sudden turn against one another. So basically my trajectory and my journey really started with solving that issue. So figuring out what happened. It started with an internship at the Dutch Parliament in The Hague, where I was able to interview individuals who had been involved in sort of the scandal with the Dutch UN peacekeepers in Srebrenica. Then I continued on. I was really lucky to get an internship at the U.S. Embassy in Sarajevo, which was just an incredible experience because as a State Department intern, you're given a lot of freedom to really choose your path. And so I was fascinated by post-conflict education systems and the fact that in Bosnia, in the post-conflict phase, students were attending schools divided, which just perpetuates sort of ethnic tension. So I tried to basically through research and going out in all sorts of organizations throughout the country, I tried to inform U.S. spending on the issue. And some of my other experiences included going to mass graves and seeing the International Commission of Missing Persons do DNA identification so that bodies could be reunited with family members. So it's just a really powerful experience. And then I came back from that and pursued an internship with the Scholars at Risk Network, which was really cool to be able to do something like that while on campus. And then also for my senior seminar, wrote sort of a continuation of this issue of post-conflict education in Bosnia, which I just, like Illinois Wesleyan, I think has our essays online, and I keep getting notifications. I just hit 1,000 downloads while I thought. But yeah, so basically when I graduated, I knew that I wanted to go back to the Balkans, and I had applied for a Fulbright grant and was awarded a Fulbright to go to Bulgaria. It was the English teaching assistantship, which, it doesn't matter if you have a background in teaching or not, it's still just a really excellent opportunity to figure out sort of where you want to go after graduating. I didn't only focus on my teaching duties. I did a lot of community outreach, tried to increase philanthropy amongst my students, and then really it was sort of the starting point for my inspiration sort of to be connected to cultures and getting to know different people through language and handicrafts, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So from there, I had actually met my now husband while interning at the U.S. Embassy, and so he was in a program, the Pickering program, which I would also recommend, which gets you right into the Foreign Service. So he was in the Foreign Service, and I joined him in Kenya, which was his first post, and was able to get a research assistantship position with the Danish Refugee Council. So I split my time between Nairobi and the Geneva refugee camps, which are on the border between Ethiopia and Somalia. I'm not going to talk too much about being in the field because I think Charlie can touch on that a lot more, but it definitely takes a toll on you, and for me, I'm vegetarian, and I happened to be there during Ramadan, and out of respect, I didn't eat or drink, and it's like 90 degrees there, so it was just very physically challenging for me. So this is my teacher, mentor, and her sister, who I've now seen like 20 times since being there. They're a part of my family and some of my students. yeah, and that was my team of enumerators who I worked with for a period of several months, where we were going out into the camps to collect data on livelihood opportunities for Somali refugees who have been in these camps for, decades. So it was really interesting. Okay, now here comes the sort of challenging part of my life, because I knew that I wanted to go and boost my academic background in human rights. And I had deferred my admission so that I could do my Fulbright and then go straight to LSE. And basically, it changed sort of everything that I believed in, because I had human rights had become such a part of my identity. When I sort of got to classes and found out that there are so many scholars who basically are trying to rip down all these foundations, it became very hard to then graduate and feel empowered and excited to go out into this field that is wrought with so many problems. So I won't touch too much on them, but some things that I'm still working through and trying to overcome is that good intentions are not enough. You have to be accountable for what you're doing. And there are so many issues with accountability in the aid world that just makes it very challenging to sort of know where to work. And then I think people forget that human rights organizations and humanitarian organizations, they're businesses, and in order to survive, they really have to have these problems. So there's a conflict of interest in most aid organizations. So that's been really hard to overcome. And then imagery of beneficiaries, how we impose identities on certain groups and how that can impact their agency and their ability to be empowered. I have a horrifying story, So my friend Dom was posted in Geneva for a year and a half. She was the communications manager for a large international organization, and she was told by headquarters that they were going to have a photojournalist come to take pictures for a new ad campaign. And so she had set up these trips to these different camps, and the first day they went out, and to their delight, there was no issue with malnourishment, and the photojournalist was pretty upset, and so they had to plan a second day of going out and trying to find this picture. And so eventually they find a malnourished child who ended up dying the next day because they were using the car that was supposed to be used for delivering the necessary aid. And then she sent the photo back to headquarters, and headquarters said, no, that child is too deathly looking. We need to find a photo of a child that's more in between life and death. So there's definitely a lot of issues around the business of aid. And then a turning point in my studies was reading something by Amartya Sen. I'm not even going to pretend like I totally understand what he's all about, because he writes in a very complicated way, but something that stuck with me was his assessment on famine. So why does famine happen every year, especially in Ethiopia? It's not because there isn't enough food. That's not the issue. The issue is that people have access, or people struggle to have access to food. And so then you have to factor in all of the politics that really goes into the aid world. So I basically left my master's degree feeling totally confused and really overwhelmed. And again, I'm still processing. From there, I was eligible, because at that time I had married my now husband, and I was eligible to take language courses with him to train before we were posted to Belgrade, Serbia. So I did 10 months of intensive Serbo-Croatian to be fluent or have working proficiency. And then I started my job at Praxis in Belgrade. And Praxis was kind of just a bit of it just kind of saved my mental state, because it's an NGO focused on securing rights for Roma. And I was tasked with utilizing research to really shape strong and effective interventions, and I could be accountable for the projects and the programs that we were putting into place. And so for me, I learned that I don't want to be far away from the beneficiaries. I want to be close. I want to see that my impact is not causing harm, that I'm right there, and that there's no negative consequences or side effects of the work that I'm doing. So that was really reassuring and uplifting. And then this is where my weird thing comes in. So I became very fascinated with handicrafts and how they connect to culture. And I took intensive carpet weaving classes for the whole time that we were in Serbia. And it's something that I'm still really passionate about, and considering even pursuing a PhD to focus more on textiles and textile industry and sort of cultural preservation. So in summary, I hope I didn't lose anybody. My advice: you will start to see in the human rights and humanitarian world that there are these specific tracks that start to show up. So my advice is, work backwards. Like, find job descriptions, just do a Google search, find job descriptions that pique your interest, look at the skills that they're looking for, and then find internships, not necessarily at those organizations, but find internships that help you build those skills. The two tracks that I think are good entry level in are communications and fundraising. Fundraising is a big part of the aid world, and if you are good at it could be a great career track for you. But that will get your foot in the door for most of these large organizations. And then establishing a domestic network. I know that you're probably taught a lot about networking, but you've got to network. You will find when you graduate that the people you're graduating with are a natural network for you, but that shouldn't excuse you not being active and engaged right now. And learning a language is another great sort of, it's just important. We're competing with Europeans who speak 4 languages, done from birth, basically. So really, I emphasize that, and then be strategic about what languages you're studying, so that if you want to end up working in that area, that you have that solid background. And then last is my email. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer after we're done sort of each presenting. But yeah, I think going to IWU is a great step in being as well prepared as possible for the real world. But this work is challenging, and you will find that you really have to be competitive and at your best at all times. So, okay, I'm going to present Charlie next. So you've already heard a bit about him. I'll let him come up and
Is this just your presentation?
oh no, go to the PowerPoint icon, and then it's up already.
I have a PowerPoint prepared that specifically relates to Congo. I know that the focus of this is kind of to talk about careers, but before I begin, I want to know who I'm talking to. Juniors, seniors, can you raise your hand? So, okay, pretty much everyone. Political science, international affairs, business related? Okay, what are some of the other ones out there then? Psych, okay. Others?
English.
Okay.
Career time.
Yeah. You've been here since I was at Wesleyan. I don't know if you're older. All of us, right, we were international affairs, political science, right? And it's kind of an interesting degree when you try and implement it in the career realm. It's not as clear-cut as I think some of the other ones. And so it creates certain challenges, but there are a lot of opportunities out there, and perhaps that's what we're here to do, is present some of those options, or at least what we found that work. So Warren kind of gave a brief introduction already. I graduated in 2010, and then I did the Dunn Fellowship through the governor's office, which was a very accessible program. The application wasn't too difficult, the interviews weren't that bad. and I don't think they had a huge pool of applicants. So as a political science major, the Dunn Fellowship is really something you should look into. That being said, it is political in nature. You work for the governor's office. I had the pleasure of working for Quinn, right, a Democrat who wasn't terribly corrupt, and now we have Republicans, so it's kind of on your political leanings, But then there was also another fellowship with the Illinois General Assembly that I applied to and took interest in. I would promote that one as well. I forget what it was called, but
Curry.
I'm sorry?
The Curry.
Yeah, yep. And so with the Dunn Fellowship, I moved out. I'm sorry?
Applications are being accepted right now for those
There you go,
courses.
guys. And so with the Dunn Fellowship, I moved out to DC for a year, and I worked there, and I very much enjoyed it. DC is a cool city. During that time, I applied to the Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship, which I received and used after a year in DC, and I went out to Geneva, Switzerland to do my master's. When I wrapped up my master's, as Emily was saying, right, like networking, okay, I mean, you always got to do it, but what was nice was the group of people that I graduated with, we all hit the job market at the same time. And so you already have a natural network of your friends, of your colleagues that are worked into it through your studies. And that's honestly how I found my job. I'm not exactly sure you can apply to all the jobs you find online, but really once you get a good network of people, that's when the opportunities are going to come. And that took me to the Democratic Republic of Congo for the past 3 years. And I just got back about a month ago. And so I'm still doing it. It's really cold back here. So, but this is where I was based for 2 of the 3 years in Goma. So 2 things. I would like to talk just briefly about Congo, my experience there, some of the critiques as well that Emily already touched upon, right? I mean, the title of this conference is Work That Matters. When you go in with a very critical eye, it matters on paper, but then once you're actually living in it, once you're doing the day-to-day, it changes a little bit. You start to see things that you don't see from the outside. You have a very idealistic point of view of the United Nations, of how these organizations work, and then you see it as that industry. Then you see it as, money, funding, and all these things, and it changes a little bit. But we're going to try our best not to be too pessimistic, right, and still present a positive message. But, I mean, Congo, it's a really crazy place. I mean, their history is nothing but dismal, and the country, the region, is in nothing but a state of catastrophe, really. You have the Central African Republic to the north, which is going through a civil war, and we have refugees pouring in there. South Sudan is also in the northeastern part, and it's about to blow up. If you move further over, Uganda, you have the LRA, the Lord's Resistance Army, present in that area. You work your way down, you have Rwanda and Burundi. Rwanda is the cause of Eastern Congo's instability since the genocide in 1994, and Burundi is going through their own civil war right now as well. You move further south, you have the Angolan border, where there's a lot of tense relations between Congo and Angola. And then the Republic of the Congo, I suppose that's like the one stable place, there's not much going on there, but I mean, DRC, it's surrounded by 9 countries, and not one of them is in a very stable state. And so it's just like this entire Central Republic area, this region, that's always in a state of flux. I always like this one. There's the size of Africa. DRC itself is pretty huge. It's the size of the Mississippi to the east, the size of the entire Western Europe. I was working with the International Organization for Migration, IOM. It's an intergovernmental organization, and in DRC we had 2 main problematic areas. We had our humanitarian operations, and then we had stabilization. We called it stabilization activities, which were quasi-development in nature, but we really can't work towards development there yet because any gains you make can be lost the next day. So here we had a series of projects in the mines. So this is a tin mine in Rubaya, and then here's a coltan mine. This is where rare earth elements are found in phones. This is the source of those minerals. The humanitarian side, we have about 50 displacement sites that are pretty much refugee camps. But they're not filled with refugees, they're filled with internally displaced people. People that have left their homes in Congo to move to another part in Congo to seek safety, pretty much. We have about 190,000 people living in these camps. And IOM, one of our responsibilities was to maintain the most basic standards in these camps. You're talking shelters, we have to distribute the plastic tarps. You're talking hygiene, building toilets, making sure there's runoff, making sure there's wells, clean drinking water. distributions of the plastic jerry cans so they can transport their water, things along those lines. So like the very basic things that are needed for this place not to become a cholera hot zone and for people pretty much to survive. Here's an example of one of the sheets that we would distribute, right? We collect information, how many people, how many families, how many men, how many women, how many children. Most of the time it was women and children. Right? The men are out, they're in the armed groups, they're in the army, they're in the mines, they're not really present. And so all of these households within these displacement sites are managed by women or children as well. And here's just some of the pictures. It's always a bit tricky for me when I look at it from the States, right? Because it's pretty dismal conditions. And yet, when you look at it with a critical eye, we've been doing the same thing there for 20 years. And so you have to begin at some point to wonder whether or not we're actually having any positive impact on the development of the country. We're maintaining the status quo. And so on the one hand, if you critique these international organizations, they do have their own industry. They do have their own machinery, and you have to feed into that. They have their own bureaucracies as well, which is incredibly frustrating in a situation like Congo. And then on the other hand, we have issues of aid dependency. We have issues of corruption as well. The UN and a lot of the NGOs, we have primary accountability to the people, and even then it's shaky at best, you know? We have primary accountability to our donors, not the people. But the people don't expect certain services from their government because we're there. And so this entire development of a nation state never really takes place because the government doesn't do anything. It's the NGOs that come in and provide these basic services. And so it's one of those other critiques that you don't see from the outset. But it's something that is quite frustrating. You have to deal with. And so we had the humanitarian operations, and that's what we were doing. We were working in the sites. We had to deal with logistics, movement of goods, getting the plastic tarps to the people living in the sites. And then we had stabilization activities. And there I was managing 4 different projects. One was police reform, working with the police of Eastern Congo. One was working with the Army, the FARDC, for military justice reform. We were building a prison. It was supposed to be an infrastructure project to try and enhance the presence of the state. And then the last one was also an infrastructure project, a border post at a main border crossing between Congo and Uganda. Every single one of those projects was a catastrophe. Nothing went well, and it burned me out too. Those were difficult projects because we were working with the police of Eastern Congo, and we were working with the Army. The state is so dysfunctional that the Army and the police, who have AK-47s, they don't get paid. They don't receive their salaries. And so they get their money, they get their monthly salaries through any means necessary. And so when you try and enact reforms with the highly corrupt systems, you know, it didn't work very well. But the one thing was that it was interesting. Like being out in Eastern Congo, being able to read into the history and kind of see history live out right in front of you, I very much enjoyed that. I think I still have a few more minutes, and so before I hand it over to whoever's next, kind of what Emily did, recommendations. I'm guessing that a lot of people have debt in the room. It's so wise. I mean, at a certain point, you just have to accept it. And I would not freak out about it. Don't let it dictate your decisions. Take it into consideration, be responsible about it, but don't let it dictate your decisions. Everyone's going to have debt at some point. It's not that big of a deal. You can manage it, and you can manage it responsibly. And so, right, like breathe easy on that, because it was one thing that I was worrying about my senior year. The second thing, I don't know, I'm 27, right? And so for me, I still have like 3 years to play around with. Once I hit 30, I'm gonna start taking things seriously, you know? But take that into consideration. Once undergrad ends, you don't have to enter into a highly professional environment. Have fun with your 20s still. Don't let your college days be the best days of your life. There's still a lot of things that you can do. And I think that's really important. Like Emily did the Fulbright. Teaching abroad is a really cool experience. You get to go out to a new country, and it's something that you could use for future jobs. I'm really surprised that not many people apply to the Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship. You'll have to speak with Warren because it's changed in structure since I applied, but it's money to go live abroad and continue your studies. Like, there's some really interesting opportunities that are out there, and one of the other things, all of us, I think, have done our masters, no? 3 out of 4.
Dropped out.
She dropped out. I don't know what
what it is, but like there's this temptation to go back to school. And obviously I did, I kind of gave into it, but it's not entirely necessary. It kind of is though with the job hunt. It's a bit of a tricky situation. Like your senior year, there's always been a structured path. You go to high school, you go to college, and you get a job, and if you don't find that job right away, there's a knee-jerk reaction to go back to school. Don't do it right away. Don't go right from your undergrad into a master's program. You don't bring along any experiences, and it's just a continuation of your undergrad. There's really not much value added. And so for me, I wish I would have given myself a bit more time before I went back and did my master's. Perhaps the third and the fourth thing, be in the right place. Like I put myself in Geneva, Switzerland, grace of the Rotary Scholarship, right? And that's what got me this job, and that's what brought me to Congo. It was simply the fact that I was living there, I was doing the internships, I was studying. Put yourself in the places where you can, find that next step. And then language is a huge thing. I didn't pick up French until after I graduated, and it was a pain in the butt. If you can pick up a language now, or if you have time, if you can start your studies, create a base, a foundation, so that when you move into another country, if you're looking to go abroad, you have a solid base, at least with the grammar, you can really build on it and build on it quickly. So yeah, I wish you all the best of luck. And yeah, thanks for having us. And so who am I introducing next, guys? Monica, come on up.
So my name is Monica, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I do now, and then go backwards to explain how I got to that, and then, like Charlie and Emily did, just give some advice. So currently I teach at Brightwood Education Campus, which is a DC public school. It is a pre-K through 8th grade school that's high poverty, 99% low income, free reduced lunch. About 65% of my students are English language learners, about 70% are Latino, 10% Ethiopian, and I have a high number of undocumented immigrant students as well. I teach 8th grade U.S. history. The last 2 years I also started a peace education program, so I've been teaching peace classes to 2nd through 5th graders. So it's like a specialist class. So the kids go to gym one day, music, art, they come to me for peace. This year I also advanced into more of a leadership role at my school as well, and I'm the middle school writing coach, so I coach 7 teachers with their instructional practices, focusing on writing instruction. I partnered with this embassy adoption program. Obviously being in DC, there's lots of resources there, so I'm partnered with the Embassy of India, and they promote Indian culture and programming to my 5th grade class, one of my 5th grade peace classes. This year we are taking our students on a trip to France over spring break, so it's our first trip abroad, which is really exciting. I'm a huge proponent of experiential learning, and last year was the first time that I took the students to New York, so it was their first domestic trip, and then now we're taking them to France. And then DCPS just got a lot of funding to promote international exposure and travel to more students. So I was selected as a DCPS travel ambassador. So I'll find out sometime tonight actually where I'm taking another group of students in the summer. So either Ecuador, Madrid, or Costa Rica. I'm also partnered up with the U.S. Institute of Peace. There are 6 of us across the country. We're focused on peace education. So it's just a great network of peace educators in different states, different environments, talking about our practices. So we got my middle schoolers, and then the other 2 pictures are of my students in peace classes. So Emily was talking about networking. About 7 years ago, I was in DC for a conference thanks to Illinois Wesleyan, and I was on a train going from DC to Baltimore, and I was sitting next to this woman who looked very professional, had a suit on, little flat thing. So I asked her, we got talking, and I asked her, how did you end up where you are today? And I think it's that's a question that a lot of us have asked other people as well. And she gave me this quote by the Spanish poet Antonio Machado, who said, basically, there is no road you make your own road, right? So oftentimes when you think about a career, it's very easy to be like, okay, how can I get there? And if I do this internship or go to this degree program or take this class, like I'll be able to get to that position, and that's often not the case. And in my job search, when I asked people like how they got there, it was often random, or just like people had lots of different paths to get there. So I just wanted to throw that out to you, just because I want you to remind yourself that like you can take lots of different paths to where you want to go, and sometimes you may not know where you want to go until you are there. All right, so how I got to where I am. So during Wesleyan, I'm a teacher, so I like visuals. All right, so I started off, I was highly involved with Circle K, so that's back to elementary school. I tutored and mentored students there for 4 years. I spent a semester in Washington, D.C. I interned at the Council on Hemispheric Affairs. That was my first professional internship. Very cool, learned about Latin American affairs, wrote some articles. Then I was able to work at Barack Obama's Senate office in Chicago. From there, got involved in his campaign, brought the campaign stuff to Wesleyan, which was very exciting at that time. Spent a semester in Spain, interned in UNICEF. Came back, was able to utilize my Spanish language skills at the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants, and that was a very, very powerful experience, and what I focused my senior seminar and capstone experience on. It was during that time that I interviewed undocumented immigrants, mostly coming from El Salvador, and it was a little almost traumatizing because I would do these telephonic intakes and hear their stories and try to make their stories as best as possible for a lawyer to take them. But it was like the same story over and over about gangs. So I was trying to figure out how I can continue with that. So I thought, well, maybe I can be one of those lawyers who helps them, but then all of those lawyers are pro bono lawyers. So I was like, oh, I'm never gonna make any money. So I took the LSAT, prepared for all of that, but ended up not applying to law school. Still trying to figure out, like I came into Wesleyan with a lot of different interests. My parents are both from India, so I've taken a few trips there and had some powerful experiences there as well. I also was interested in education, but did not focus in education at Wesleyan, but knew that I was interested in getting kids to learn about global issues. So some other opportunities that I applied for were, there was a one-year service fellowship in India. It was a Clinton fellowship, and I ended up turning that down for a number of reasons. And then they offered it again to me, and then I turned it down a second time. And then I also turned down an opportunity to teach in Spain. And at that time, it was stressful, but also a very emotional time because there were a lot of personal issues involved. Like my family was not very supportive of me doing these opportunities, but it was also a really great time for me to reflect on like why I actually applied for those things, what I wanted to get out of it, and what I would be doing there. And I would ask myself a lot of questions that Emily and Charlie were bringing up about international service and the purpose of going there, and especially for the India one, and even the Spain one. Like I didn't have any teaching experience. I wasn't a teacher myself, and I didn't feel comfortable being in a role where I was in a position to help other teachers. So I said, okay, how can I like get those skills, and then maybe in the future feel comfortable and confident to be able to collaborate abroad. So after graduation, I turned down these things, and I didn't have anything, so I worked at Gap for 6 months. And to figure out what to do. And that's okay. So then I knew I started focusing on what I wanted to do, and the whole thing was I majored in international studies and also Spanish, and I wanted to kind of intertwine all of that. I was interested in peace education, human rights, global education. So I got my master's in international training and education, and it was a great opportunity because I got to take the classes I wanted to. I got really cool paid internships, which there are things such as paid internships, so look for them, you'll get paid for them. But during that time I got to focus on international education policy, study abroad, domestic education policy, human rights education. I did human rights trainings and then worked in the DC public schools then. And I just tried to like enroll myself and apply for as many opportunities as I could, like to gain more professional skills in peace and nonviolence education training. So I got scholarships to study in Mexico at a place called Narco News, which is a school of authentic journalism, another institute University of Pennsylvania called Teaching Peace and Revolution Around the World. And then also one of the, I guess the coolest things or proudest things I have during my grad school experience was preparing and leading a group of students to Cuba. And that was at a time when relations weren't that great, but it took a year to get the license and everything, and it was a very neat experience. It was a comparative education trip. Since then, as a teacher, I continue to explore global and comparative education, so I've gotten scholarships and grants to study education in Turkey, in Geneva. I got a grant this past summer. I was in India and Argentina, and then also for my students, as I mentioned, I'm taking them to France and one of those things. Okay, so these are my students. So this was us at the U.S. Institute of Peace presenting a peace quilt that my younger students made, and then below are my 8th graders. And even though it's a history class, I infuse a lot of peace and nonviolence education within it. And this was on the International Day of Peace, and they were holding these enough signs in solidarity with a group of youth in Afghanistan. And I just wanted to show this picture to show that, like, you can, for me, like, I was really interested in teaching peace classes and peace education, but it wasn't until I started teaching peace classes that I realized I can also just do that in a regular class. So I just, like, whenever you enter a career, whatever it is, just think, like, be creative, and you can make what you want from it. So some advice, during your job search, as you saw from my experiences, like, even though I turned down things, like, apply for as many things as possible, because just going through that application process, you reflect and you figure out, like, what it is that you actually want, what it is that you actually want. And for me, one of those application processes was going through the Truman Scholarship, in which Professor Shah really helped me figure out, like, international and global education was the route I wanted to take. 2, you're gonna get rejected from jobs a lot. We all did, and it's really, really hard not to take it personally, but don't take it personally. Like, just move on, or figure out if that's something you really want. Figure out what you need more to get to that position. It's okay to say no. Like, don't feel pressured that you have to take on every opportunity that comes your way, or feel like, if I don't take this, nothing else is gonna come your way. Like, things will work out. And it's okay to be critical of opportunities, and it's okay to say no, even when other people around you are like, oh yeah, this is amazing, why wouldn't you do that? And then find opportunities that connect your passion and skill. Most importantly, like, surround yourself with people who support you. And for me, like, just having the network of Peace Fellows and Charlie. But just, like, it's really, really important, especially as you transition from undergrad to the real world, or whatever you want to call it, just to be around people who will support you, encourage you, like, to think critically, to be there for you, right? Because it's very easy to be around negative people, or be around people who may see things on a superficial level about the opportunities that you may or may not be part of. Once you find a job, there are some things you should also take note of, and especially if you're in a service-related job, which I feel like a lot of you are probably interested in doing if you're at this panel, just be humble. Like, yeah, you're coming from a degree or 2 degrees, and you have lots of skills and experiences, but whatever community you work in, you have to know that that community they're the expert of, like, themselves, and just go in with an open mind and an open heart that you also have to learn a lot from them. So yeah, just humility is really, really important for any job. Learn about and be part of the community. So, like, learn more about the people you are serving or working with, and try to be part of that. For me, that involved, like, home visits, getting to know my students' families, just being an integral part of that area, and then advocate for yourself. So, like, for grad school, it meant me advocating for the classes that I wanted to, where at the end, when people were looking at my transcript and they were like, how did you even graduate? And I was like, no, I told them this is what I want to do, these are the classes I want to take, and it worked. In terms of my job, it took me 3.5 years to really advocate for myself to be in a healthy position, because I have a lot of roles in my school, and being in an urban environment can be very stressful, but just make sure that you're taking care of yourself in the process. And also, just like Emily, with handicrafts and carpets, have fun with life and develop a talent or hobby or something that's therapeutic. For you to do that's different. And for me, that was DJing. So, yeah, because you'll notice like a lot of the work that we've done, whether it's domestic or international, there's a lot of trauma involved, and it takes a toll on you. And things that normally were therapeutic for me, like running, it just wasn't cutting it. And you just have to find something where, you can have that balance. So, sorry, I went over.
I do not have a PowerPoint. So can I just close this, or, okay. Glad she had the DJ part in there, because if you can just imagine, Monica did it. So my name is Jessica Meyer. In October of 2013, I graduated here in May 2011. October 2013, I attempted suicide. I woke up in the morning, and instead of going to work, drove as far north as I could go, which was the border of Michigan and Canada. I rented a hotel room, bought some pills from somebody in the parking lot, bought some alcohol, and spent 3 days essentially dying. My roommate at the time was the daughter of the governor of Michigan, former governor of Michigan, so she had state police, she had Canadian police, she had local police searching for me. They eventually found me, took me to the hospital, and they said probably about 4 hours, and my body would have started shutting down. My systems would have shut down, and I would have died. I say that to now tell you what led me to that point, and now where I am. So at IWU, I loved it. I was an activist. I brought back the Amnesty International chapter. I started another organization called Renegades for Peace that did a lot with the Iraq and Afghanistan war and just a lot of peace initiatives. I was a peace fellow. I went on the IWU London program. I just did a lot on IWU's campus, but then also in the community. I was a member of the Bloomington Normal Citizens for Peace and Justice and did a lot of collaborative events here on campus, and just really loved the opportunity that IWU gave me to just do whatever the heck I wanted. So if you guys feel like there's something you want to do but you haven't tried it, IWU is amazing about just giving me the opportunity to just run with it and try it. They're very supportive of that. So I knew, social justice, human rights was my passion. I was an international studies major. And so my senior year, I really wanted to go abroad in a place that wasn't Europe. There was a place that I could really see what I was studying in classes kind of in person and get that in-person experience before I graduated and kind of went into international human rights field. So I studied at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. I took about 5 classes in human rights and then did an internship and lived in Johannesburg. Similar to Emily, human rights in an academic sense abroad is really different from, I think, our view in America. They totally dismantled everything I believed with human rights. They criticized everything. And being in South Africa, where the Constitution is one of the most recent constitutions that has been formed in the 90s, it was extremely progressive, one of the most progressive constitutions in terms of human rights. They have everything in there you can think of as a right. And here were people from that country essentially telling me everything I believed was wrong. And then on the flip side, actually working in the community and working with children that were dying from HIV/AIDS that were embarrassed about saying that they had it, so their code word was pneumonia. So everyone I met, it was like, I have pneumonia, I'm dying from pneumonia. And just seeing a country that, there's tons of aid and tons of help, and here I was to help on the ground, and I just didn't feel like I was doing anything. Really depressing time, and so I was coming back to Iowa and graduating, and my world was totally flipped upside down. I did not know if I wanted to stay with human rights. I did not know if I wanted to stay international. So I said, why don't I graduate and take a year and stay domestic and do something that's still helping a community, but just kind of get my bearings a little bit. So I applied for an AmeriCorps program. I applied for City Year, which does tutoring and mentoring in public school systems across the US and also in South Africa. And so when I applied, I chose just city of most need. So there's tons of city around the country, or you can say city of most need and they'll place you somewhere. And so they placed me in Detroit. And my grandparents are from like 30 minutes outside of Detroit, but I'd never been there before. You know, everything on the news was like pretty negative and kind of crazy. And so I had no idea what I was going into, but said, hey, if this is the city of most need in the US, then I want to be there. I don't want to be somewhere cushy. I want to make sure I'm making a difference this year in the US. So I moved to Detroit, spent a year with City Year where you have a team of 10 people in a school. You have a very specific group of students that you're working with, and you're doing 3 things, focusing on academics, behavior, and attendance. It was the most amazing year I had had of my life. I felt like I was making a difference. I had relationships with students. I had a support system around me of 10 people that knew exactly what I was going through every single day. And I felt that this is what I wanted to do. I had no idea I wanted to be in education, but this is what I wanted to do. So the principal of that school hired me to be the first college advisor. Detroit Public School System has been a wreck for years. It was still a wreck when I was there. It still is. And so they didn't have a counselor. I was cheaper than hiring a counselor, so they hired me to be a college advisor, which is essentially a counselor, but I have no degree in that. And it was, I had a lot more swear words in my recorder, but it was a mess. Being on the administration side, I had, my principal that had certain metrics. We are a United Way and Skillman Foundation neighborhood. We're one of the worst neighborhoods in Detroit, so we had like foundational metrics that needed to be met. We had state metrics because DPS is run by an emergency manager. There's no elected superintendent. It's someone that's appointed that controls everything, so they had their metrics. So essentially I was working with students that were being raped on their way to school, were being murdered after school. As soon as they walked outside, there were people waiting for them, teachers that were being murdered, and I had to get 90% acceptance into college, 60% people actually going to college, so who cares about those 30% that got accepted as long as 60% go. Just ridiculous metrics that I was meeting, but I, as the college advisor, had to deal with the consequence that as soon as they graduated, and now we're moving on to the next year, those students I know are still in the neighborhood and aren't going anywhere, and nobody cared about that. I didn't have that support system anymore. I didn't have those 10 people, that team of awesome people that were going through the same thing. So I felt that I couldn't leave because I had, everyone in my life that was telling me I couldn't do what you do. That's so incredible, and you'll hear that a lot if you're going into this work. You're a martyr. Thank you for everything that you do. And I just felt that pressure that I couldn't leave. This is what my life would be forever, is this really depressive environment that I had no control over. So I woke up one day and chose to end my life, to not work. Thank God. So I came back from that experience and was 6 months unemployed, had no idea what I wanted to do. Here I thought education would be my life. I was going through a master's program in counseling. I ended up quitting. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back international. I was out of it for so long. It's really hard once you kind of leave that network to then try to get in it. I applied for different kinds of international programs, peace programs, just everything. And I wasn't getting anything. I was getting interviewed, but because I hadn't consistently kept something, I felt like people were looking at my resume and were like, what happened? What's the deal? So 6 months of unemployment, just chaos, had no idea what I was gonna do. A friend of mine, knew my story and just really wanted to help me out. So he actually quit his job to give it to me because he just saw that I was in a place that I really needed something. and really needed that support. So your support system is extremely important. And I ended up being hired for this organization called D-Hive, which was the Welcome Center of Detroit. So you walk in and you say, hey, I want to live somewhere, and we help you with that. Or, hey, I need an internship, we help you with that. Or, I need to go to a restaurant, we help you with that. So on paper, not really anything connected to social justice or international studies or human rights or anything, but it was a space that I felt like, okay, let me just get connected to something. Let me feel like I have a purpose every day. This is fun. Finally, I'm working in a place where I'm like smiling every day and I'm having a good time and everyone's happy and nobody has like a lot of stress and it's not really depressing. I was hired as the program manager of Build, which was their entrepreneurship training program. I was like, okay, I don't know anything about business, but this sounds fun. Like everyone's really optimistic and excited about opening business, and I can be around that group of people. Worked there for a year. We ended up transitioning out of D-Hive and became our own organization. I became director of programming, where we service, now they're at about 800 people that have taken the class. 70% are female, 65% are black, 85% are low to moderate income, and they're coming from all neighborhoods of Detroit. And it's an entrepreneurship and small business program that Detroit has never seen before. Most of the development is very focused on white, young, high-tech, high-scale, in downtown, midtown area. So it's an extremely progressive and diverse and inclusive program. So there I was able to work with people day to day. I was able to work in specific neighborhoods, and I felt that I was finally connected again to a mission. I was connected to helping people. It wasn't necessarily international studies, human rights, kind of this global scale. It was a little bit smaller, but I felt like I had a purpose. I now am working for a consultancy firm. Our client is a specific neighborhoods development corporation, where we're tasked with making sure residents and small business owners are included in the development plans of their neighborhood in the most inclusive and diverse way possible. So I say all that to kind of give a couple pieces of advice like everybody else. There is no one path. I think is extremely important to understand. How you are now and the person you are now and the things you believe will not be who you are 6 years from now, 7 years from now, 10 years from now. So if you see this path and for some reason in 2 years you're here instead, this is no longer what you want. And just be aware of that. There's a difference between people that go into pre-med and want to be a doctor and that's what they want to do forever versus where we're at. Everybody in this room is kind of like, I feel that this is something I want to do. Like, you're connected to human beings. So you want to do something where you're helping other human beings. It may not be what you think is what you want to do now, and just be conscious of that. Second thing is this work is not selfless. I think there's a total misconception that if you're doing things to help others, you're a martyr, and that you shouldn't think of like your own health, your own mental health, your emotional health, and your body as equal to the work that you're doing, but it is. As much as you're helping other people, you should be helping yourself. So be very conscious of that and be very aware of your limits and the things that you need to do to be happy. If you're doing something that is not making you happy in a way that's like detrimental to your own mental well-being, you shouldn't be doing that. And it's okay. It's okay to leave that and do something else. That's fine. Third thing, cast your net as small as you need to go. I applaud Charlie and Emily for the international scale of work that they're able to do. That's not something that I can do. Mentally and emotionally, I'm aware that I cannot do that. And so for me, as small as I needed to go was working in one neighborhood in Detroit. That's where I feel like I'm making a huge difference, and I wake up every day and know that I'm impacting people's lives. And that's important for you guys to know, because I think there's also a misconception that you need to be helping everybody in the world in this particular area. Go as small as you need to go. That's okay. And then the last thing is that you all sitting in this room are extremely privileged. You are getting a higher education. So the more that whatever work you're doing, you can empower the people that you're working with and kind of be in the shadows and lift them up to actually do the work, is where you're going to find the most impact. You're not at the front and center. It's the people you're trying to help that you're trying to bring to your level. So that's also something that I realized in the work that I'm doing. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you to all of you. I think all of us know why this was titled Work That Matters. These people are truly doing things that make an incredible difference in our world, and I think an incredible difference in their lives. So I'd like to thank Emily, Jessica, Monica, and Charlie for being with us today. Emily for reaching out to coordinate this, Brock for choosing today to propose, and everything that made the stars align. So all of our panelists have graciously agreed to stay and answer individual questions that you might have. So at this time, I'm going to leave them with a little token of our appreciation. Remember, folks, this is education, limited budgets, but you can never have too much Illinois Wesleyan swag. So can we give them a final round of applause? It's coming to that. Come on down with your questions, folks.
Hey, Warren,
Yes,
you want to announce the Work That Matters 2 plan?
I do. Thank you.
You did.
We have a poster as you came in, but next week on February 3rd, we have a part 2, if you will, of Work That Matters. We have a different type of program. We have 3 organizations, the Peace Corps, City Year, and the State Department that will be with us. So if you're interested in internships or employment with any of those agencies, please take the time to join us. We're going to start a little earlier because it's a Wednesday, so we'll start the panel at 11, and then we'll have lunch and an opportunity for you to visit with the representatives out here in the foyer following the panel presentation. So next Wednesday, February 11th. Look forward to seeing you. Don't all rush forward at once.
Can I just make a comment and at the same time applaud? Listening to Emily and Charlie here, when they said that they saw all the depressing side of aid, of international aid. I met somebody who was in the same situation, who he said he felt like, he was working for an international aid agency, and I don't know what it was, and he felt like he was just shuffling paper from here to here, writing grant proposal, blah, blah, blah. I met him, and he's now working with an NGO that establishes a social enterprise to help impoverished communities in the Philippines. And here's the plug. For those students who are interested, we have this internship, Asia internship, fully funded during the summer, all expenses paid. If you want to have that kind of an experience to put in your resume, talk to us. That deadline has been extended until February 5. So, thank you.
It's not so much as a question as a comment. I just want to say that I am incredibly glad and proud and humbled to call this school my own and to have each and every one of you, such incredible people, do the work that you do. So honestly, just listening to all of your stories, each one of them honestly has given me something to take away, and I'm even now more assured that this is the right path to take. Well, there is no right path, right? We'll find them along the way, but I'm incredibly humbled by each and every one of your experiences, and just wow. So thank you so much for coming and doing this. Thank you so much.
So maybe you could help the faculty and staff out a little bit. As you look back, what were, let's say, 1 or 2 of the things we really did well, and what were the things we really didn't do very well in terms of, you're figuring out your wonderful career trajectory?
I mean, when people ask me about my experience at Wesleyan, the thing that always pops up first is just the relationships that we all were able to build with our professors. So just the amount of time and mentorship that each of us received from different professors here was incredible. And I don't think a lot of students at different universities have that. And I think just the amount of time that was invested in each of us, as we were going through different opportunities or were applying for things, it really had to help shape us.
I mean, I think that IU does a tremendous job sort of strengthening critical thinking skills. And I realize that that sounds simple, but having just spent many years in the Balkans where people like really can't, students can't get from point A to point C, like I think just the way that we've been taught to think is something that I am really grateful for. And that happened in class.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think there's anything that was bad or that you guys didn't do. Like there's only so much that professors during college, like what your role is, and I think your role was amazing and you fulfilled that completely. It's unfortunate that we can't keep you with us our entire lives. That would be impossible, but yeah, I mean, you guys are incredible. You guys are incredible.
For me, study abroad, that was a big thing. That was the first time I actually stepped out of Wesleyan. That was the first time I stepped out of like the northwest suburbs of Illinois, and then Bloomington, Norway. That was a big one for me. And then the compassion that some of the professors showed me my senior year, that was pretty important for me as well in carrying through some of my ambitions. What didn't you do? I don't know, it's kind of tricky. I was a member of the fraternity scene on campus, and you know what? Maybe one of my regrets. I'm not putting that on you, I'm not putting that on the faculty, but I'm not exactly sure if that was part of that process of opening up for me. Actually, it wasn't. There's a lot of social pressures, especially when you're a freshman, as you get brought onto the scene. And I didn't do much with the international house, for example, and I regret that now. You know what I mean? And I think that was in large part because my social scene was defined by that fraternity. It limited the amount that I was exposed to. It's not on you guys, it's on the faculty, but I know that's been an ongoing discussion, and that's just my point of view.
I think there's a question in the back.
Yes, I have a question. Obviously, each of you have had numerous experiences to lead you to where you are today. But I'm really wanting to know when you felt you knew what you wanted to do. Was this in high school? Was it in college? Were those experiences or influences prior to coming here? Or was most of it somehow developed here and then refined, obviously, beyond here?
For me, it was 100% Illinois Wesleyan. I remember coming here as a freshman and being in the huge room when all freshmen come and hear the president speak, and I looked at everybody and I was like, I don't know how to define myself against everybody else here. I don't really know what my interests are here at Illinois West. I don't know who I am. I don't know if any of us do. And I remember the first semester of freshman year, I met an older student that was like, if you wanted to do an activity on campus or like start an organization, they're totally cool about that. And I organized a camp out on the quad in partnership with Invisible Children, which now I'm Invisible Children, but I was like, all right, yeah, I'll like do this thing, and it was so powerful, and I just always remember feeling that was my goal. Like the fact that I was able to do that here and explore that and find that had such an emotional reaction to me. I mean, I had never been able to do that in high school, and I don't know if another campus, I know a lot of people that go to really large schools and never feel that they're empowered to organize something like that. So it was definitely IWU for me.
Yeah, it was the International Human Rights course that sort of set me on this trajectory. I laughed because I honestly don't know if I've answered the question, what do I want to do? I'm like, and like as both everybody's said a little bit about just like that it's okay that you don't know what you want to do, and just being open to all sorts of opportunities that come your way, and not being set in one specific track, I guess.
For me, I started getting interested, or I started questioning at the end of high school why students, or at least in my school, we weren't getting exposed to current events and global issues. And I sort of brought that with me to Wesleyan. Did not pursue education then, but like had those side opportunities, like in Spain. I did a lot of, with UNICEF, a lot of work in education at that elementary school. But I think just having that focus of like getting the degree in international studies and feeling confident that now I have like the background knowledge that I need to teach those issues. So yeah, mostly it was missing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I think you have some of our emails. Feel free to come up if you want to stay in touch or have questions.